It has been nearly 60 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished into the desert night. Right now, federal investigators are holding the genetic sequence and the face of the man who stood outside her home. They possess high-definition footage recovered from cloud servers showing his exact movements before the crime even took place. They just do not have his name. The suspect executed a highly calculated plan to blind the surveillance hardware on the property during the early morning. Hours. He systematically cut the video feed directly at the source while wearing gloves and concealing his physical features. He believed he successfully erased his digital footprint before taking an 84-year-old woman away. He forgot about the cloud. The device was indeed neutralized physically at the front door during the critical moments of the abduction. However, the system had already transmitted packets of residual data capturing him scouting the location days earlier. This reveals a meticulously rehearsed operation rather than a random crime of opportunity or a simple burglary. He left a trail. Despite leaving biological material and digital evidence that would normally close a case rapidly, he remains a ghost. He managed to evade the immediate law enforcement dragnet while carrying a heavily branded backpack and a firearm. This massive disconnect between the forensic evidence available and the lack of an arrest warrant demands deeper analysis. Welcome back to Tracking Evil with John. Today, we deconstruct the timeline of a predator currently hunted by the most advanced tracking technologies in the world. We will examine the forensic profile to understand exactly how the genetic genealogy net is closing around this suspect. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications as we break down the evidence piece by piece. The authorities have the data. We must look at the timeline to understand the magnitude of his operational mistakes and the evidence he left. The timeline provides the structural foundation for everything the forensic teams are currently processing in their secured laboratories. To isolate his errors, we must first isolate the exact window of the abduction and the physical evidence recovered. Time is not on his side. On January 31st, Nancy Guthrie was dropped off at her residence by her son-in-law. Law enforcement confirmed the garage door officially closed at 9:50 that night, securing the perimeter of the house. The electronic silence lasted for nearly 4 uninterrupted hours as the neighborhood slept around the isolated property. At exactly 1:47, the camera died. Between the moment the garage door sealed the house and the camera going dark, a violent intrusion occurred. Blood matching the DNA profile of the victim was later discovered near the front entryway of the property. She was forcefully removed from the premises and transported to an unknown location by the unidentified male suspect. She requires daily medication. The elderly woman relies on a pacemaker to survive and was taken from her sanctuary into the dark. We know the exact window of time the perpetrator had to execute this kidnapping and transport the victim. It was a precise 3-hour and 57-minute gap where the house was completely isolated physically. He thought he was invisible. Police initially operated under the assumption that the suspect had successfully blinded them at the 1:47 mark. They treated that specific timestamp as the absolute beginning of the criminal event and based their search on it. They assumed he arrived under the cover of darkness and executed his plan flawlessly without leaving a digital trace. They were entirely wrong. The investigation quickly revealed that the timeline of his involvement started long before that garage door ever closed. His confidence in destroying the hardware at the scene blinded him to the reality of modern digital surveillance network. He thought he controlled the narrative by cutting the camera feed at the exact moment of his violent intrusion. The data tells another story. The digital residual files retrieved from the cloud servers map out a highly calculated progression of stalking behavior. Investigators are currently analyzing this specific behavior to understand his level of sophistication and his ultimate criminal motive. The physical blood evidence at the front door directly contradicts the timeline of her entering through the garage. The pieces do not fit. If she entered the home and the garage closed, the location of the blood is highly anomalous. The forensic teams found the biological material outside the front door, indicating a secondary confrontation occurred on the porch. This suggests the perpetrator either lured her back outside or intercepted her before she could fully secure the residence. He was waiting for her. The destruction of the doorbell camera was meant to hide the exact nature of this front porch struggle. He disabled the internal wiring to ensure no visual record of the kidnapping existed on the local hard drive. Police recognized the immediate severity of the situation when they observed the tampered hardware during their morning welfare check. They secured the immediate perimeter. The transition from a simple missing persons case to a federal kidnapping investigation happened at an unprecedented speed. They understood that a suspect capable of blinding a modern security system posed an extreme threat to public safety. The initial lack of a ransom demand further complicated the behavioral profile the investigative teams were attempting to build. The silence was deafening. Without a motive, the authorities relied entirely on the silent testimony of the physical evidence left at the scene. They cataloged every microscopic trace of biological material and mapped the exact trajectory of the blood on the concrete. This meticulous documentation is what eventually allowed them to challenge the initial timeline created by the camera going dark. They needed more data points. The act of disabling the front door security hardware requires a specific level of technical premeditation. The suspected intruder needed to understand the exact field of view to approach without immediate detection. He utilized gloved hands to physically manipulate the device and sever the connection to the local network router. He carefully planned his approach. The destruction of the camera was executed to conceal the violent struggle taking place on the porch. Forensic technicians documented a significant blood trail originating near the front entryway of the isolated residential property. Laboratory analysis officially matched this biological evidence directly to the genetic profile of the missing elderly victim. The location makes no sense. The investigation into the hardware manipulation reveals a chilling degree of spatial awareness from the alleged perpetrator. He navigated the blind spots of the property to reach the entryway without triggering the primary motion sensors. The physical tampering suggests he possessed prior knowledge regarding the specific model of the home security system. This was not a guess. The timeline contradiction surrounding the biological evidence presents a significant challenge to the initial home invasion theory. Official reports place the victim inside the residence after the garage door sealed at 9:50 precisely. Finding her confirmed DNA outside the primary structure implies a secondary event drew her out into the night. She opened the front door. Whether the suspect lured her using a deceptive tactic or intercepted her during a perimeter check remains unknown. The forensic documentation of the struggle indicates the physical confrontation began immediately at the threshold of the property. Investigators are analyzing the exact dispersion pattern of the blood to reconstruct the sequence of the violent struggle. The camera captured nothing locally. The deliberate destruction of the recording equipment created an artificial blind spot during the most critical forensic window. The alleged kidnapper operated under the assumption that disabling the physical lens would guarantee his absolute visual anonymity. He wore heavy winter clothing and a facial covering to obscure his identity from any potential secondary angles. His preparation seemed entirely flawless. Forensic teams spent days processing the external concrete surfaces to gather every microscopic trace left by the suspect. They utilized advanced chemical reagents to locate potential latent prints on the destroyed casing of the doorbell device. The lack of immediate local suspects forced federal agents to expand their perimeter search into the surrounding desert. The trail went completely cold. Authorities realized that analyzing the physical destruction of the camera would not provide the identity of the perpetrator. They needed to look beyond the broken plastic and severed wires lying near the front porch area. The modern security infrastructure operates through continuous data transmission rather than relying exclusively on vulnerable local digital storage. The suspect misunderstood this technology. Federal investigators immediately subpoenaed the technology conglomerate responsible for hosting the server infrastructure for the specific camera model. They requested the complete digital archive associated with the IP address of the victim to reconstruct the timeline. The process of extracting fragmented information from corporate data centers requires specialized warrants and sophisticated digital forensic analysis. They found the missing piece. The system architecture is designed to continuously upload compressed video packets before any physical damage can be registered. This built-in redundancy ensures that the final moments of a violent confrontation are preserved in the cloud. The technicians successfully reconstructed a series of residual files that the suspected attacker believed he had permanently deleted. The revelation changes the investigation. The recovered high-definition footage did not just capture the violent destruction of the hardware that morning. The digital artifacts revealed a separate event occurring at the residence before the night of the abduction. The masked suspect was recorded standing outside the front door of the property on a previous date. He was practicing his approach. This visual evidence upgrades the behavioral profile from a spontaneous target to a highly premeditated stalking operation. The footage displays the unidentified man evaluating the property layout and testing the surveillance equipment angles. He wanted to ensure his final attack would be executed with maximum efficiency and minimal visual identification. The trial run was recorded. Knowing he monitored an elderly woman multiple times elevates the severity of the threat to the public. To understand how digital forensics dismantle criminal alibis, you must subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. We analyze the details of ongoing federal investigations to provide you with the most accurate timeline reconstructions. The recovered cloud data proves the perpetrator invested significant time observing the daily routines of the household. He knew she was alone. This level of dedicated surveillance indicates he possessed a specific motive rather than conducting a random sweep. The visual confirmation of his prior presence at the crime scene shifts the trajectory of the investigation. Investigators are reviewing weeks of localized traffic camera data to identify vehicles matching his potential arrival window. The search grid is expanding. The footage from the trial run provides analysts with crucial data points regarding his physical movements and gait. He displays a distinct level of comfort navigating the exposed areas of the property during his reconnaissance. The psychological profile suggests a meticulous offender requiring total control over the environment before executing violent acts. The planning was incredibly thorough. The existence of the residual video files exposes a critical flaw in the operational security of the suspect. He completely misunderstood the technological architecture of the surveillance system he spent days planning to physically destroy. This technological blind spot provided law enforcement with the most important piece of visual evidence in the case. The cloud captured his face. Despite his heavy clothing, the camera recorded specific biometric markers that analysts are currently processing through secure databases. The angle of the lens during the trial run captured details he intentionally hid during the abduction event. He approached the door differently when he was simply observing, compared to when he arrived to commit crimes. His posture betrayed his intentions. The Federal Behavioral Analysis Unit is comparing the movements in the residual video to known criminal operating procedures. They are looking for subtle indicators of military training or security background based on his tactical approach methods. The meticulous nature of his preliminary scouting mission suggests he is highly disciplined in his criminal endeavors. He waited for the opportunity. The trial run video confirms he was intimately familiar with the geographical layout of the neighborhood before attacking. Authorities are questioning whether he utilized a secondary observation post nearby to monitor the activities of the victim. The presence of a dedicated stalker operating in a quiet residential area terrifies the community and law enforcement. The danger remains highly active. The juxtaposition of his careful planning and his technological ignorance creates a fascinating paradox for the criminal profilers. He possessed the tactical skills to execute a silent abduction, but lacked the understanding of modern network storage. This specific combination of traits narrows the suspect pool by eliminating highly sophisticated digital criminals from the investigation. He is a physical threat. The visual confirmation of his trial run forces investigators to reevaluate every piece of physical evidence collected locally. If he visited the property on multiple occasions, he increased the probability of leaving biological material behind previously. The forensic teams are now expanding their sweep to include areas he might have occupied during surveillance phases. Every surface is highly suspect. The timeline contradiction regarding the front door blood evidence aligns perfectly with the discovery of the stalking footage. He was already comfortable approaching the main entryway because he had successfully tested the perimeter without raising alarms. The victim likely responded to a routine disturbance at the door engineered by the suspect to lure her. The trap was perfectly set. The revelation of the cloud data shifts the narrative from a sudden intrusion to a calculated predatory hunt. Authorities are withholding the exact date of the trial run to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. They are using this classified chronological detail to verify witness statements and eliminate false confessions during the investigation. The secret protects the case. The digital evidence proves the perpetrator is a methodical stalker targeting vulnerable individuals residing in isolated desert locations. The discovery of his reconnaissance elevates the urgency of the federal manhunt to an unprecedented national priority level. As we decode the forensic footprint he left behind, the reality of his meticulous preparation becomes increasingly horrifying. He is still out there. The detail destroying his entirely professional operational facade actually rests right upon his own shoulders. Official forensic image analysis identified the specific bag he carried during the night of the abduction. Authorities confirmed the suspect utilized a 25-liter capacity pack manufactured by the brand Ozark Trail. This item represents a massive vulnerability. This specific line of outdoor equipment is distributed exclusively through the retail giant known as Walmart. Federal investigators immediately recognized this mass-market purchasing choice as a monumental error in his planning. They are currently executing sweeping digital subpoenas across every regional store location to intercept the transaction. The digital dragnet is rapidly expanding. Agents are meticulously cross-referencing millions of localized credit card purchases against corresponding security camera timestamps. If the alleged kidnapper purchased this item electronically, his financial data will inevitably expose his identity. Even a cash transaction leaves a physical footprint, requiring analysts to review thousands of hours of footage. He cannot hide from the cameras. The contrast between his careful physical concealment and his consumer behavior completely baffles the investigative teams. He wore gloves to prevent leaving latent prints while carrying a highly traceable retail product outside. This specific contradiction highlights the immense difficulty of orchestrating a truly flawless criminal operation under modern surveillance. Every purchase creates a permanent record. Detectives are filtering the massive volume of retail data to isolate male customers purchasing that exact model. They correlate the store proximity to the crime scene to prioritize the most probable regional suspect profiles. This meticulous process of elimination requires extraordinary computing power and thousands of dedicated federal man-hours. The circle is steadily growing tighter. The retail exclusivity of the backpack transforms an ordinary piece of fabric into a lethal tracking beacon. He likely selected the item for its utilitarian volume without considering the immense supply chain tracking capabilities. Law enforcement relies heavily on these minor behavioral oversights to dismantle the protective layers of an offender. The investigation demands absolute analytical precision. Finding the point of sale provides the crucial geographical anchor needed to locate his primary operating base. Investigators assume he bought the gear specifically for this abduction based on its pristine visual condition. They are hunting for the exact moment he walked through those sliding glass retail doors unaware. The financial algorithms never stop searching. The physical evidence presents a localized threat, while the incoming communications introduce an entirely new investigative vector. The family recently received an electronic extortion demand requiring a massive financial transfer using decentralized cryptocurrency networks. This digital ransom note complicates the established behavioral profile of the suspected perpetrator, currently under intense scrutiny. The message lacks a critical element. The anonymous sender completely failed to provide any verifiable proof of life regarding the missing elderly woman. Without visual or auditory confirmation of her current physical status, the extortion attempt remains highly suspicious operationally. Federal agents routinely encounter opportunistic cybercriminals attempting to exploit high-profile media cases for financial gain. The digital demand might be fake. Former federal agent Jennifer Coffindaffer publicly analyzed the operational tactics displayed by the suspect during his incursions. She categorized his repeated physical surveillance missions at the property as a highly risky tactical maneuver overall. According to her expert assessment, this behavior points toward a deeply personal obsession rather than simple profit. A professional avoids unnecessary scene exposure. The blatant risks he took during the trial run contradict the logic of a purely financially motivated kidnapping. An extortionist usually prioritizes absolute operational security to guarantee the successful collection of the demanded cryptocurrency funds. Returning to the target location multiple times exponentially increased his chances of catastrophic failure and immediate apprehension. His psychological drive overrides his logic. The investigation is currently navigating the treacherous space between a potential cyber scam and a lethal obsession. If the ransom demand is legitimate, the kidnapper demonstrates an alarming level of compartmentalized criminal sophistication today. He manages untraceable digital wallets while physically stalking a vulnerable target in a quiet residential desert neighborhood. The conflicting evidence creates intense friction. The behavioral analysis unit continues to dissect these contradicting data points to predict his next potential move. The lack of proof of life severely restricts the tactical negotiation options available to the federal response teams. They must operate under the grim assumption that the physical abduction was not primarily about the money. The stakes are increasing every second. The psychological profile suggests an offender who craves total dominance over his environment and his selected victims. The brazen nature of the initial property scouting reveals a terrifying level of confidence in his evasion capabilities. We are tracking a predator who carefully balances aggressive physical action with completely anonymous digital communication channels. This complexity requires your absolute attention. You must subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to follow this rapidly evolving federal manhunt daily. We analyze every new piece of forensic intelligence as the authorities release the documentation to the public. The suspect believes he constructed an impenetrable fortress of operational security by utilizing encrypted financial networks recently. He made a fatal biological mistake. Regardless of his ultimate psychological motive, he left something behind that no digital currency can ever obscure. The physical struggle at the front entryway compromised his biological isolation and handed investigators their greatest weapon. While he hides behind decentralized computer networks, the microscopic evidence is currently speaking volumes in the laboratory. His genetic sequence is now exposed. The forensic focus entirely shifts from the digital realm to the microscopic realities of the physical crime scene. Technicians exhausted their resources extracting data from the broken hardware before turning to the environmental trace evidence. They meticulously vacuumed the concrete porch, searching for any cellular material transferred during the violent nighttime struggle. The desert wind complicates this process. The suspect wore heavy winter gear specifically designed to prevent the shedding of hair or skin cells. He utilized gloves to ensure the doorbell camera casing remained completely free of his unique identifying ridges. The preparation indicates he studied basic forensic countermeasures before launching his aggressive assault against the elderly victim. Nature rarely tolerates absolute perfection, though. The sheer physical exertion required to subdue the homeowner inevitably compromises even the most careful protective layering. During the chaotic struggle at the threshold, the alleged kidnapper inadvertently deposited biological material onto the concrete. This microscopic transfer represents the most significant breakthrough for the federal agents managing the sprawling investigative grid. The laboratory confirmed the foreign origin. The analysts successfully isolated a genetic profile that definitively does not belong to the victim or her family. This biological signature acts as an absolute mathematical identifier tying the unknown suspect directly to the violent confrontation. It provides a flawless biological blueprint of the predator currently hiding somewhere within the vast American landscape. The genetic code is entirely unique. Investigators immediately uploaded the sequence into the National Criminal Database, hoping for an instantaneous identification of the perpetrator. The system cross-referenced the markers against millions of convicted felons and previous crime scene evidentiary submissions globally. The digital search returned absolutely nothing, confirming the alleged attacker does not possess a prior federal criminal record. He is currently a biological ghost. The absence of a database match drastically alters the trajectory of the entire regional law enforcement response protocol. It means they are hunting a highly organized offender who has successfully avoided previous detection by the authorities. His ability to operate without generating a historical police footprint makes the physical tracking process incredibly challenging today. They must utilize alternative forensic methodologies. The discovery of the unidentified genetic material introduces a profound psychological weight to the ongoing federal case file. They hold the essence of the attacker in a test tube while he roams the streets freely. The biological evidence guarantees that whenever he is finally apprehended, his conviction is a mathematical and scientific certainty. The DNA provides an absolute truth. The investigative friction between the anonymous cryptocurrency demands and the highly personal biological evidence remains totally unresolved today. The agents must decipher whether the ransom note is a deliberate countermeasure designed to distract the tracking teams. might be utilizing the digital extortion angle to disguise a far more disturbing underlying psychological motivation now. The deception layers are incredibly thick. Former federal agent Coffindaffer stressed that the suspect demonstrated an alarming level of comfort during his property incursions. The residual cloud footage showcases a man operating methodically without the frantic urgency typically associated with opportunistic criminals. This calculated approach deeply concerns the profilers attempting to anticipate his next potentially violent interaction with the public. He follows his own strict timeline. The sheer audacity required to return to the location after the initial scouting mission indicates immense tactical arrogance. He believed his physical disguise and his planned technological sabotage would shield him from any meaningful forensic scrutiny. The suspect critically underestimated the redundancy of the surveillance network and the persistence of modern microscopic biological trace. His arrogance generated his inevitable downfall. The massive federal mobilization reflects the extreme danger this specific individual poses to the wider civilian community locally. They recognize that an offender capable of executing this operation might escalate his violent tendencies if left unchallenged. The pressure to identify the genetic profile before he selects another target is driving the federal forensic laboratories. The scientific analysis is running continuously. The analysts are preparing to utilize a specialized tracking technique because the standard criminal databases yielded zero results. They must look beyond the established records of convicted felons to find the hidden identity of the attacker. The biological material left at the scene contains the ancestral history necessary to expose his entire family lineage. The genetic net is deploying now. The backpack remains the primary geographical tether, while the biological evidence provides the absolute foundation for his prosecution. The combination of consumer tracking and advanced genetic profiling creates a multi-dimensional trap for the unsuspecting alleged kidnapper. He left his financial footprint in a retail store and his biological signature directly on the victimized property. The evidence is slowly converging together. The investigators must carefully untangle the digital ransom demands without compromising the integrity of the physical crime scene. They are executing a highly complex operation requiring coordination between cybersecurity experts and microscopic trace evidence technicians. The suspect inadvertently triggered a massive deployment of the most advanced investigative resources available to the federal government. He cannot outrun the scientific data. The strategic analysis provided by the former agent highlights the profound behavioral anomalies present within the attack sequence. The multiple visits to the residence suggest a predatory tracking process focused entirely on the specific elderly victim. This personal targeting drastically reduces the probability that this was a random home invasion gone horribly wrong tonight. He hunted her with extreme precision. We will continue to dissect the emerging forensic details as the authorities process the retail and biological data. The timeline of his movements exposes the critical vulnerabilities in his operational planning and his overall surveillance. Awareness. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to track the deployment of these advanced federal forensic tracking methodologies. The hunt is escalating very quickly. The digital extortion attempt adds a layer of modern complexity to an otherwise deeply physical and violent crime. The lack of verifying visual media in the ransom communication forces the agents to question its overall authenticity. They cannot allocate crucial resources chasing a phantom cybercriminal while a physical predator remains active and undetected. The geographical focus must remain absolute. The evidence recovered from the front porch anchors the investigation to the brutal reality of the struggle. The alleged perpetrator failed to account for the microscopic transfer of cellular material during his meticulously planned assault. His reliance on gloves and facial coverings proved completely insufficient against the rigorous protocols of the modern laboratory. Science always illuminates the darkest corners. The failure of the standard database search merely shifts the investigative strategy toward a far more powerful technology. The authorities possess the biological key required to unlock the ancestral history of the man wearing the mask. He might have erased his digital presence, but he cannot erase the genetic code inherited from his family. The biological evidence is entirely permanent. The contrasting elements of a cheap consumer backpack and an advanced cryptocurrency ransom demand define this complex investigation. The suspect operates simultaneously as a localized physical stalker and a sophisticated digital extortionist hiding behind encrypted networks. The behavioral profilers must reconcile these contradictory characteristics to accurately predict the geographic location of the missing victim. The analysis requires absolute objective clarity. The federal agents are systematically closing the operational distance between the recovered evidence and the anonymous alleged attacker. They are transforming the trace biological material and the retail purchasing data into a highly precise targeting mechanism. The man who believed he committed the perfect crime is currently being hunted by his own microscopic failures. The trap is ready to spring. The investigation continues to navigate the devastating reality that the victim remains missing despite the overwhelming forensic evidence. The agents must leverage the genetic profile to definitively identify the suspect before the case goes completely cold. The pressure surrounding the laboratory analysis intensifies every single hour the woman remains separated from her family. They have exactly what they need. The traditional federal database search yielded absolutely no matches for the microscopic material collected outside. This negative result forced the investigative teams to deploy a far more sophisticated biological tracking weapon. Analysts officially transitioned the forensic strategy toward the complex science of advanced genetic genealogy profiling. The net is closing tightly. The biological sample recovered from the front porch concrete contains his entire ancestral genetic blueprint. Authorities recognized that finding a direct match inside the standard criminal system was no longer necessary. They merely needed to identify a distant relative who previously submitted their DNA for commercial testing. He cannot hide his bloodline. The process mirrors the exact methodology utilized to apprehend some of the most notorious modern predators. By uploading the unknown sequence into specialized open-source ancestry databases, the laboratory creates a map. The algorithms identify individuals sharing specific chromosomal blocks with the unidentified man who took the victim. The family tree begins growing. Forensic genealogists construct sprawling reverse family trees starting from these identified distant cousins and moving forward. They meticulously search through public census records and marriage certificates to find the intersecting ancestral branches. This painstaking chronological tracing eventually isolates a specific family unit containing a male of the appropriate age. The suspect pool shrinks dramatically. He might have successfully avoided generating a criminal record during his previous decades of unknown activities. He might have carefully planned his geographical approach to the residence using the desert landscape effectively. He could never anticipate that a third cousin submitting a recreational saliva swab would expose him. Science bypasses his operational security. The genetic sequencing eliminates the need for a physical suspect to initiate the comparative analytical process. Investigators are currently building the genealogical profile while simultaneously processing the digital retail transactions from Walmart. The intersection of these two massive data streams creates an inescapable mathematical trap for the perpetrator. His anonymity is rapidly expiring. If the retail data identifies a buyer, the genetic profile will immediately confirm his physical presence. The investigative teams hold the absolute biological truth regarding the violent struggle at the threshold. They are simply waiting for the ancestral algorithm to attach a legal name to that truth. The final layer is peeling. The use of this specific genetic technology completely changes the psychological dynamic of the ongoing manhunt. The suspected kidnapper is likely monitoring the public media releases regarding the status of the investigation. Knowing the federal government possesses his DNA sequence must generate immense psychological pressure on the suspect. He knows time is running. We are witnessing the systematic dismantling of a carefully constructed criminal operation through advanced molecular biology. You must subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow this genetic tracking process. When the authorities finally announce the biological match, we will dissect the entire genealogical operational timeline. The apprehension is mathematically inevitable. The advanced profiling techniques require exceptional patience from the law enforcement agencies managing the immense pressure. Constructing an accurate family tree from fragmented cousin matches demands hundreds of hours of genealogical research. The analysts must verify every single birth and death record to ensure the lineage is legally sound. They cannot afford a mistake. Once the genealogists isolate a specific group of brothers, they will deploy covert surveillance tracking teams. The agents will quietly follow these potential suspects to collect discarded items containing fresh biological material. A discarded coffee cup or a used napkin will provide the final confirmatory sequence they require. The trap is completely invisible. The suspect assumes his daily routines remain secure because the police have not officially named him. He continues to operate within society while federal agents map his entire genetic history in secret. This asymmetrical investigative warfare guarantees that the final confrontation will occur entirely on law enforcement terms. The element of surprise shifts. The biological evidence gathered during the brutal nighttime struggle represents his ultimate failure as a criminal. He believed the destruction of the security camera would eliminate the only reliable witness to his crime. He failed to realize that his own cellular structure would become the most articulate witness available. The cells tell the entire story. The utilization of genetic genealogy represents the deepest and most complex layer of this ongoing mystery. We have moved far beyond analyzing digital footprints and examining fragmented video files stored on servers. The investigation is now reading the fundamental biological code of the man responsible for the violence. He is trapped by biology. The authorities are currently navigating the intricate legal requirements placed surrounding the use of public ancestry databases. They must ensure every step of the genetic extraction process withstands extreme scrutiny during a future trial. The integrity of the microscopic trace evidence must remain absolute to secure a federal kidnapping conviction. The legal foundation is critical. The meticulous nature of this biological tracking process explains the current silence from the lead investigators. They are actively tightening the genetic net rather than broadcasting their operational progress to the public. The lack of an immediate arrest does not indicate a stalled investigation or a cold case. The scientific process demands complete silence. Every passing hour allows the algorithms to process another layer of the sprawling suspect family tree. The biological markers left at the residential property are slowly tearing away his mask from the inside. He thought he outsmarted the physical security systems, protecting the vulnerable elderly woman that dark night. His own DNA betrayed his identity. The sheer scale of this microscopic manhunt demonstrates the relentless nature of modern federal forensic operations. They are reconstructing a human identity from microscopic fragments left behind during a chaotic physical struggle. The suspect currently exists as a collection of genetic markers slowly coming together into a face. The biological puzzle is almost complete. The genetic genealogy strategy guarantees that the suspect cannot escape by simply altering his physical appearance. He cannot change the fundamental chromosomal data inherited from his ancestors over multiple previous generations. The authorities hold a biological tracking device that he can never remove or destroy or encrypt. His genetic fate is completely sealed. Despite the monumental advancements in the forensic tracing process, the central tragedy remains entirely unresolved today. As we reach the end of March, the whereabouts of Nancy Guthrie are still completely unknown. The advanced biological tracking and the digital retail dragnet have not yet located the missing woman. The investigation is still ongoing. The federal agents are managing a massive influx of data while actively searching the desert sectors. The family endures the agonizing silence, while the forensic laboratories sequence the critical cellular material collected. They wait for the scientific breakthrough that will finally explain the violence of that January night. The physical search continues every day. The state of the investigation rests upon the successful processing of two distinct massive data sets. The Walmart transaction records regarding the backpack must align with the genealogical profile currently being constructed. When those two analytical streams cross, the authorities will finally possess the identity of the perpetrator. The mathematical certainty requires agonizing patience. Several critical questions remain unanswered as the investigators systematically narrow the geographical focus of their search. Did the suspect execute this highly coordinated abduction entirely alone, or did he utilize an accomplice? The physical timeline requires immense logistical precision, suggesting someone else might have managed the transport vehicle. A driver would change everything. The suspect spent critical minutes disabling the surveillance hardware and struggling with the victim on the porch. Having an accomplice managing the external perimeter and the secondary transportation would drastically increase his efficiency. A coordinated team represents a significantly higher operational threat to the surrounding regional residential communities. The logistical footprint would be larger. The second unanswered question involves the depth of his knowledge regarding the specific schedules of the family. He chose a night when the elderly victim was dropped off and left alone inside the residence. Did he possess intimate local knowledge of their movements, or did he merely observe a pattern? The surveillance implies deep familiarity. If he is a local resident, he might have blended into the community seamlessly during the day. He could have monitored the property while masquerading as a delivery driver or a utility worker. Identifying his method of intelligence gathering is critical to understanding the true nature of his targeting. He watched them very closely. The reality of the current situation is that a dangerous individual remains active and completely unidentified. He possesses the tactical capability to blind security networks and execute violent abductions with significant precision. The community remains highly vigilant as the federal authorities maintain their strict operational silence regarding suspects. The threat has not been neutralized. The lack of a verified proof of life following the digital cryptocurrency demand casts a dark shadow. Investigators must prepare for the possibility that the extortion attempt was a secondary opportunistic digital crime. They cannot let the anonymous electronic communications distract them from the biological reality of the physical scene. The genetic evidence remains the absolute priority. The suspect likely feels a false sense of security because his face has not been broadcast globally. He might believe his tactical preparations during the trial run successfully shielded him from law enforcement. He does not fully comprehend the power of the microscopic trace evidence currently processing in the laboratory. The silence does not equal safety. We stand at the precipice of a major investigative breakthrough as the ancestral tree comes together. The sheer volume of forensic resources dedicated to this specific abduction case is virtually unprecedented locally. The authorities are utilizing every available technological and scientific tool to bring the perpetrator to justice. The manhunt is entering its final phase. Time continues to pass agonizingly slowly for the family members, desperately waiting for any official updates. They must rely entirely on the silent progression of the biological algorithms analyzing the trace evidence. The investigation has not stalled, but has merely shifted into a realm where science dictates the pace. The genetic sequencing cannot be rushed. The clock is steadily running out for the masked man who stood on that concrete porch. He left a piece of himself behind that will eventually lead federal agents directly to his door. The ongoing nature of this federal case serves as a terrifying reminder of modern criminal capabilities. He cannot run from the blood. An individual bypassed digital security systems and vanished into the night with a vulnerable elderly victim. The authorities are working tirelessly to ensure this level of predatory behavior does not go unpunished. The suspect is currently living borrowed time while the genealogical algorithms process his extended family network. The forensic evidence is completely overwhelming. Every passing day brings the investigative teams one generation closer to identifying his specific ancestral branch. He is participating in a race against molecular science that he is mathematically guaranteed to lose. We will not offer false hope or speculative conclusions regarding the ultimate resolution of this abduction. The end is approaching rapidly. The facts dictate that Nancy Guthrie remains missing and her alleged attacker remains unidentified right now. We must trust the rigorous scientific process currently decoding the biological material left at the scene. The investigators are holding the ultimate trump card in the form of his unique genetic sequence. The evidence will provide the answers. Time is passing for the victim, but the countdown has truly begun for the masked kidnapper. He believes his mask and his digital sabotage granted him permanent immunity from federal law enforcement. The authorities merely await the final algorithmic match to deploy their tactical units to his location. He is already caught chemically. A fatal misconception exists regarding how modern digital surveillance networks actually store and transmit visual data. The alleged kidnapper operated under the outdated assumption that physical destruction guarantees absolute visual anonymity. Locally, he failed to comprehend that smart home devices continuously stream compressed packets to remote server architectures. The hardware is just a lens. What this case teaches us about residential security is the absolute necessity of integrated cloud redundancy. Homeowners must ensure their external perimeter cameras maintain a constant uplink separate from vulnerable local routers. When an intruder physically attacks the doorbell casing, the critical footage has already safely left the property. The evidence survives the violence. Relying exclusively on internal hard drives or easily accessible memory cards creates a catastrophic single point of failure. The suspect believed he controlled the technological environment by simply cutting the visible wires at the door. He unknowingly triggered an automated failover protocol that preserved his premeditated stalking behavior for federal analysts. Technology never forgets the past. This investigation highlights the profound behavioral shift required for modern predators attempting to evade digital capture. They can no longer simply wear dark clothing and sever communication lines to create an investigative void. The digital ecosystem requires a level of technological sophistication that most violent offenders completely lack today. The cloud is constantly watching. Every citizen evaluating their personal security posture must prioritize systems offering immediate offsite data replication continually. The visual confirmation of an attacker becomes permanent the exact millisecond the motion sensor is tripped. The physical destruction of the camera merely serves as further evidence of his malicious criminal intent. He essentially documented his own crime. While physical security measures remain important, the digital failsafes are what ultimately expose the alleged perpetrator. The technology functions precisely as designed even when the physical unit is violently ripped from the wall. This invisible digital safety net provides law enforcement with the irrefutable timeline necessary to hunt him. The servers never sleep at night. The biological traces left behind combine with this resilient digital memory to form an inescapable forensic matrix. Technology does not lie about timelines, and genetic markers cannot obscure the reality of human identity. Federal investigators already possess the high-definition face and the exact ancestral lineage of the suspected attacker. They are currently mapping his retail footprint across regional stores while the genealogical algorithm runs continuously. The massive volume of interlocking forensic data is actively constructing a cage around this unidentified man. He simply does not know it. We will cover every single development in this complex federal manhunt as the scientific results finalize. The moment the authorities release the official arrest warrant, we will deconstruct his entire criminal profile. You must subscribe to Tracking Evil with John to ensure you receive these critical investigative updates. The net is closing right now. The authorities are meticulously verifying the genetic links to guarantee a flawless prosecution of the suspect. Will the genetic genealogy match arrive before the suspect attempts another violent intrusion against a vulnerable target? The entire regional community waits for the digital retail records to intersect with the biological reality. The missing woman deserves immediate justice. He might have carefully planned his desert escape, but he is currently trapped inside a laboratory. The timeline of his freedom is entirely dependent on the processing speed of a massive server farm. He remains a free man tonight, but his biological signature is rapidly turning into a name. The clock is ticking for him.